It started with a laugh. Not mine, hers. The kind of laugh that comes out too fast, too loud, just a little too rehearsed. We were sitting at the dinner table, a Sunday night ritual I'd tried to preserve through the tides of busy schedules and colder conversations. Her phone buzzed, screen lighting up, and she chuckled as she turned it face down. "Who's that?" I asked, casually. At least I hoped it sounded that way. She waved a hand, reached for her wine. "Oh, it's just Brian. From work." "Brian?" She glanced at me, grinning now. "You know, my work husband." The term landed like a pebble tossed into deep water. Small, harmless on the surface, but I felt the ripple in my chest, tightening just under my ribs. "Work husband," I repeated, forcing a smile. "Yeah, you've heard me mention him before. He's hilarious. Totally harmless. It's just a joke we have around the office." She reached over to squeeze my hand, which rested motionless beside my fork. "Don't worry, babe. You've got nothing to be jealous about." I nodded, lips pressing into a faint smile, but something in me didn't sit right after that night. It wasn't just the word. It was the way she said it. Like she'd rehearsed the reassurance. Like she expected the question and already had the answer. For the next few weeks, I tried to ignore it. I really did. I told myself it was innocent. People have friends at work. Flirtation doesn't mean betrayal. I'd seen enough of those corporate icebreakers. Work wife, work husband. Silly labels that meant nothing, right? But then she started staying later. She used to text when she was leaving. But now, there were more late meetings, client calls, and the occasional silence that lasted hours. I'd be heating up leftovers by myself, watching the driveway remain empty as the sky darkened. I'd check her location, not obsessively, but occasionally, and it would say she was still at the office, or sometimes, just location unavailable. One Thursday night, I called her around 9 p.m. She answered on the fourth ring, wind in the background. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Can't talk long. Just stepping out of a client dinner." "Where?" "Downtown," she said quickly. "You know that fusion place near the office?" I didn't question it. But after we hung up, I looked up the restaurant's hours. It had closed at 8 o'clock. That was when the seed turned into suspicion. I didn't want to be the guy who checked phones. I wasn't proud of myself. But one night, while she was in the shower, I opened her work bag to look for the charger she said she couldn't find. Her phone was in there, unlocked. I wish I could say I resisted the urge, that I was the better man. But I tapped open her messages. No saved Brian. Just a thread labeled "Be Hot Pepper" with a lot of back and forth. Jokes. Memes. Inside language I didn't understand. And then there was a photo of her coffee cup with his name scrawled across it. "To my work wife, Red Heart." Her caption read, "Spoiled again." There were no overtly romantic texts. No nudes. No confessions of love. But there was intimacy. The kind you build with someone when you're no longer building it at home. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next. I tried to convince myself that emotional closeness didn't mean physical betrayal. But it was getting harder to sleep. Harder to smile at her when she came home late, and tried to pretend everything was fine. Then came the office happy hour. She invited me, almost like she had to. "You should come," she said, slipping on heels I hadn't seen in a while. "It's casual. Plus, you'll get to meet Brian." She said his name like it was a test, like she wanted to see if I'd flinch. I went. Of course I went. The bar was modern, slick, dimly lit, full of suits loosening their ties and women holding martinis with bored expressions. She drifted through the room like she belonged there, laughing, chatting, her hand on someone's shoulder for a second too long. And then she introduced me. Brian was taller than I expected, tan, confident. His handshake was firm, his smile effortless. Too effortless. He clapped me on the back like we were old buddies, made a joke about her, always talking about me. And I laughed because I had to. But I saw the way he looked at her when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I saw the way her laugh changed when it was for him. On the ride home, I asked, "You two ever hang out outside of work?" She didn't hesitate. "Sometimes, yeah. Group lunches, that sort of thing. It's not weird, I promise." "I'm not saying it's weird," I said. "Just asking." She sighed, looked out the window. "Don't turn this into something it's not." That was the last straw. Not the words, but the tone. Defensive. Dismissive. Like I was the one crossing a line by asking. So the next Friday, I followed her. She said she had a late meeting. I told her I'd be out with friends. I left the house 10 minutes after she did, heart pounding, hands sweaty on the wheel. I parked across the street from her office and waited. At 8:14 p.m., she walked out. With him. They laughed. He touched her lower back, and she didn't move away. They walked to the far side of the parking lot, where the light barely touched. I lowered my head, watching through the windshield. And then they kissed. Not a cheek peck. Not a goodbye hug. A kiss. Full, real, intentional. I sat there across the street, in the dark, watching my marriage collapse in a single motion. My breath caught, but I didn't cry. Not then. My chest felt hollow, like a cave echoing with everything I thought I knew. I didn't confront her that night. I just drove home, pulled into the garage, and sat in the driver's seat with the engine off and the world spinning around me. That was the beginning of the end. But it wasn't the end of the story. I didn't sleep that night. The bed felt colder than it ever had. Even with her lying inches away, one leg tossed over the comforter, breathing easy in that practiced way people do when their conscience is clean or buried deep enough not to feel. My mind played it over and over. The kiss. His hand brushing her hair back. Her tilting her face into it. The kind of softness you give someone you trust, someone you want. By morning, I'd already decided I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or beg. I was going to watch. Observe. Let her keep underestimating me. It's strange how quickly your instincts adapt once the veil's lifted. You start noticing everything. Like how she set her phone face down on the nightstand. How she replied to his texts in the bathroom with the shower running. How her smiles around me had a rehearsed quality, like they'd been practiced in a mirror for someone else's benefit. A few days later, I hired someone. Discreet. Former law enforcement. I didn't want to play detective with my own life, but I needed truth that didn't come filtered through doubt. He called me 4 days later. I've got photos. I'll send them encrypted. It's pretty clear. I stared at my phone screen for a full minute after hanging up, thumb hovering over the download link. When I opened the folder, the first image hit harder than I expected. Her and Brian again. Same parking lot. Only this time it was daylight. She was laughing with her head thrown back, his hand on her hip. The next few were worse. Kissing. Leaning into each other at a patio bar. Her sitting on the hood of his car, drink in hand, legs crossed toward him. It was a relationship. Not a fling. Not a line crossed by accident. It had weight. Familiarity. And she still came home to me every night like we were real. I wanted to ask why. Why keep up the act? Why come home to someone you'd already left in every other way? But I didn't ask. Instead, I began my quiet withdrawal. Financially first. I started moving assets. Canceling joint authorizations on the accounts I'd set up. I had an emergency fund she didn't know about, one I'd built long before this, just out of an old instinct for self-preservation. I used it to consult a lawyer. You want to file first? She asked, flipping through the photos. No, I said. Not yet. Why wait? Because I wanted to understand. Not just what she did, but what I missed. That weekend, I went through old messages. Photos. Notes she'd left me. I found one from our second anniversary. Just a card, nothing fancy, with her handwriting slanted across the back. I feel safe with you. That's the thing I never knew I needed most. I read it 3 times. Then once more. What changed? When did I stop being her safe place? We met at a New Year's Eve party. I remember the glitter on her collarbone, the way she corrected someone mispronouncing my name, and then winked at me like we were already in on the same joke. Back then, her laughter made me feel chosen. Special. Now, that same laugh felt like a signal sent to someone else, like I was on the wrong frequency. 2 weeks after the parking lot, she invited me to a team dinner. Company's expanding, she said. Brian's being promoted. They're taking us all out. Us? I asked, keeping my tone even. She nodded. +1's welcome. I knew what this was. A stress test. An alibi. A way to prove there was nothing to hide. I said yes. We got dressed in silence, like 2 actors preparing for a play. She wore the red dress, the one I used to say made her look like a storm in slow motion. I tied my own tie, which she used to insist on doing for me, and we drove there together. The restaurant was upscale, all soft lighting and pressed linens. I recognized a few faces from her office. And then, there he was, Brian. He greeted me with the same polished smile, the handshake that lingered just a second too long. I smiled back. I'd studied the photos. I knew how his hand cupped the small of her back when they walked, how he looked at her when she wasn't looking. So when I saw it happen right there, across the table, in front of everyone, his knee brushing hers under the table, the quick glance they shared. I didn't flinch. She leaned over at one point and whispered, "You okay?" "Perfect," I said, just taking it all in. Later, when we got home, she seemed off. Quiet. Maybe it was something in my voice. Maybe she sensed it. She poured a drink, stood in the kitchen doorway, and asked, "You've been acting different lately." I shrugged. "Just tired." She watched me for a long second, then said, "You know you can talk to me." I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. Of course. But I didn't sleep next to her that night. I pretended to doze on the couch, told her I didn't want to keep her up with my tossing and turning. Truth was, I couldn't bear the silence between us anymore, not after knowing what it really hid. That night, I lay in the dark, replaying everything. Not just the betrayal, but the erosion. How little things added up. Her late-night showers, the lock screen she added to her phone, the way her compliments for me became fewer and more generic. And me? I started wondering if I'd stopped showing up for her long before Brian did. If I'd become the safe, predictable option. If I'd let routine replace romance, and comfort replace curiosity. None of it excused her, but it helped me understand the chasm between us. And understanding gave me clarity. I wasn't going to fight for a version of her that didn't exist anymore. I wasn't going to rage against what she'd already given to someone else. I was going to prepare. Because endings like this don't just happen. They have to be chosen. And I was finally ready to make mine. 2 weeks later, I took a day off work without telling her. She thought I'd left early for a client meeting, but instead, I sat in a quiet lawyer's office, signing papers I never imagined I'd need. The divorce would be clean. Quiet. Not because I owed her that, but because I owed myself that. No spectacle. No shouting matches or drunken confessions. Just an end. That afternoon, I returned home earlier than planned. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. Something in me needed to see it one last time. Not them. Her. The version of her I once believed in. The house was silent when I opened the door, but her keys were on the counter, and her heels sat near the entry rug. Kicked off with the kind of ease people only have in places they think are theirs forever. I went to our room. Sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for nearly 6 years. I looked at the photos on the dresser. Us on the Oregon coast. Her graduation day. That New Year's Eve party where we first met. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and started writing a letter. Not one full of accusations or venom, but clarity. A mirror she couldn't dodge. I didn't intend to leave it for her, but the words needed to exist somewhere outside of me. You told me not to worry about him. That it was harmless. That I was insecure for asking questions. But you were wrong. Not just about what you did, but about who I am. I was never the fool you assumed would stay quietly in the background. I'm the man who loved you, who believed in us, who let small doubts become silences because I wanted to trust you. And I did, until you taught me not to. You thought you were in control. Maybe you still think that. But you've already lost something you'll never get back. Me. Not the version of me that made excuses or tried to fix what you never planned to hold on to. I'm done. There's no confrontation. No fight. Just a signature. And the sound of a door closing behind you. She came home that evening with a bottle of wine. Told me she'd had the longest day. She kissed my cheek like nothing had changed. I watched her. Really watched her. And it hit me. I didn't know her anymore. At dinner, she scrolled through her phone while I talked about work. She laughed once at something, probably his message. And for a moment, I saw the whole thing from the outside. 2 people sitting across from each other, pretending routine is the same thing as connection. That night, I left the letter in the drawer beside my bed. Not for her, but for me. Proof that I'd seen it all, felt it all, and still chose peace. The next morning, I filed the papers. She didn't find out from me. My lawyer sent hers the formal notice. That's how she learned. I was gone when she got home. I'd taken only the essentials. A suitcase, my laptop, the watch she gave me for our first anniversary. I didn't want the house. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted distance. She called. I didn't answer. She texted, "Can we talk?" I read it, then turned my phone off. Weeks passed. I heard from mutual friends that she was telling people she was blindsided, that I'd left out of nowhere. Let her say what she wants. Let her rewrite the ending in whatever way helps her sleep. I know the truth, and the truth doesn't need defending. What still lingers isn't rage. It's the small memories, the quiet ones. The sound of her laugh at 11 p.m. in the kitchen. The way she'd steal fries off my plate. The night we stayed up until dawn building IKEA furniture and joking that we'd either make it through or kill each other in the process. We made it through the furniture, just not the life. Sometimes I wonder if she regrets it. If the stolen kisses in the parking lot were worth losing a home. I wonder if he stayed. If Brian was ever meant to. But I don't wonder long. These days, I sleep alone. But not lonely. There's a difference. I've started running again. Eating better. Reaching out to people I'd pulled away from when my world shrunk to fit just her. And there's something else, something softer than revenge, but more lasting. Forgiveness. Not for her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for me. For staying too long. For silencing my gut. For believing harmless meant honest. Because love shouldn't make you feel crazy. And trust shouldn't come with terms and conditions. The hardest part of healing wasn't letting go of her. It was letting go of the version of myself that believed love required blindness. Now I see everything. And I walk forward, not with bitterness, but with eyes wide open. And a heart still capable of love. Just not for her. Not anymore.